something else that you can put for the Patreons, because it's from the 5th book.
Oh, okay.
The Lodge of the Sorcerers.
Mhm.
It's translated as the Shop of the Sorcerers. And
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
that doesn't make any sense, you know.
Yeah.
The
shop.
first time that I was reading it, and there was like, Yennefer doesn't want to join the shop. Yeah, what are they selling? What's the point? And it's not like she needs any more money, but you know, she's wealthy enough. It took me some time of reading to realize that it's not a shop.
It's not like a
It was also-
physical thing.
It's
Yeah.
not a place that they go to sell stuff.
They're not selling anything at that
Yeah.
moment. No.
I
Yeah.
don't understand. I have no idea why the translator did that. It's like an association, something like that, but
Right.
not a shop.
Yeah, that's so funny. I feel like the translations that make things more confusing or sillier are always interesting to hear. Like, I
Yeah.
always think back to Alicia, who will be on the next episode, talking about the rhinoceros in French and why Geralt and Yennefer are having sex on a rhinoceros, and I don't understand. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. If you haven't seen yet, the show that I'm executive producing, Peculiar Radio, is out now. We've been working on this show for the last 2.5 years or so. I have the absolute pleasure of making it with some really amazing friends and colleagues. It's so exciting to finally be able to share it with you all. There's a bunch of minisodes out that will help introduce you to the world, and the first 3 full-length episodes are already out, with another 9 episodes to round out Season 1 of Peculiar Radio. Make sure to check it out wherever you get your podcasts so that you can support the show. It's wildly different from Breakfast in Beauclair. It is a scripted audio fiction show about a small-town radio station. You guys are going to love it. The cast and crew are incredible. They've done such an amazing job making it a funny, sincere, immersive, silly show. And yeah, can't wait to share it with you all. And I hope that you enjoy it too. As always, thanks to our podcast patrons over on the Breakfast in Beauclair Patreon, and our producer-level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Bangberg Glamorai, The Original Roach, Cotton Rose Cat, Libby, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, James Carson III, Miriam Tamaria, and Softy. As for this episode, Allison from the US and Liv from Brazil call in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt, Chapter 2. Join us as we discuss Ciri's coming of age, some of the most memorable excerpts from the series, shades of femininity in The Witcher, and Dolish Ponuts. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Time of Contempt, Chapter 2. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming 2 members of our hanza to the show. My first guest is a graduate student at the University of Washington finishing her PharmD PA program, who you'll recognize from her appearances on episode 65 and 66 of Breakfast in Beauclair, covering Volith Mare from Netflix's The Witcher. My second guest is a graphic designer from Brazil who recently moved to Canada. Please welcome Allison from the US and Liv from Brazil. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello. It's so nice to welcome you onto the show. Allison, welcome back. Liv, welcome for the first time.
Thank you so much.
As we bring you onto the show, I'd love to ask you the question I ask everybody on Breakfast in Beauclair. How did you get into the Witcher series?
Oh boy, my history with The Witcher is a little bit complicated, but here we go. My ex-boyfriend, that's when the Netflix show started to, talking about it. I started seeing some clips, some trailers and stuff, and he had the books and he was reading them. And he asked me, "What do you want to read them?" And I was like, "I don't know, what is it about?" And then he went on with a terrible summary about the show, to be honest. And I was like, "I don't think so." And I decided, well, I'll give it a chance to the show. see if it works. If it doesn't, then no. But I really like the show. I decided to give the books a chance. And then I started reading the books in 2020, I think, during the pandemic. That's about the same time when I started. It was a little bit confusing in my head what happened, what didn't. I got a lot of spoilers from the game, but I didn't mind because the story was amazing and I got hooked.
Oh, that's so fun. And a little bit of a roundabout way to go to get it, like all of the media all at once. But I'm so glad you found your way here. Yeah. How'd you find the podcast?
After I finished the books, I listened to the newest Olympian.
Oh, yeah.
I heard you there and you said, oh, I had a witch. You're like, oh my God, I need it.
I feel like so many people have found Breakfast in Beauclair through the newest Olympian and through Mike Schubert. So like huge thank you to him. I'm supposed to watch him play baseball on Tuesday, so we'll see. But what a fun friend to have. And I'm so glad you found the show too. So one of the things that I love asking people who have read other translations of the books, Liv, you've read the Portuguese version. Were there any interesting translation choices that you happened to notice while reading Time of Contempt or any other book in the series?
Oh, yeah. And it's not in this chapter. It's a little bit weird, but in the Portuguese translation, Yennefer doesn't have a kestrel. She has a hawk, like it's gavion. We call it gavion. It's much bigger. And all the time that I was reading oh my God, what's the name of the short story?
A Shard of Ice.
Yeah, Shard of Ice. And I was like, how the hell does she keep a hawk inside of the apartment, the room that they have at the
2 hawks, I think.
Yeah, 2 hawks on the antler of the thing up there. And like, what the hell? This doesn't make any sense. And then that's when I went to look up what's the animal. It doesn't make sense. And then much smaller makes much more sense. Yeah. And another thing that always caught my eye, it's at the end of the Blood of Elves, when Yennefer and Ciri are talking about, and when Ciri asks her, what's between you and Geralt, and she's, if I'm not mistaken, Yennefer says longing, regret, hope, and fear, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting, because hope and fear, it's the same thing. She says esperança and medo, which same thing. The thing is regret. That's not what she says. She says mágoa, which hurt. It's not the same thing. But I believe both of those are present in the relationship between Yennefer and Geralt. So, like, I don't mind, but it's something that, you get. That's not what she says. She doesn't say she's hurt. She says she regrets. It's something else. And also, the thing that caught my eye the most is the first word, which is longing. But in the Portuguese version, she says saudade, which is a word that only exists in the Portuguese language. And I'm like, every time I see that in a translation, I'm like, what was the word that they decided to translate to saudade, which, given the circumstances, probably the best word to translate to English is longing, but saudade is much more than that, Saudade is a mixture of nostalgia, of hurt. Sometimes it can be, like, to give a perspective, saudade was elected by the translations today as the 7th most difficult word to translate. In all of the languages, in all of the words that exist, saudade is the 7th most difficult to translate.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, that's always something that always caught my eye, because that doesn't exist. That was put there. There was interpretation. There was the translator that decided to make a choice and put there, So yeah, I believe longing is probably the closest, when you miss something that, hurts right deep in your heart, and you're like, I wish I could go back. I wish I could, return. And sometimes it's just something about your childhood that you, so that, and sometimes they say we are a bit dramatic, the Lusophones, because the most common way of saying that is say that we are dying of saudade, morrendo de saudade, that I'm dying for that, which, can be a little bit dramatic. I'm not gonna, but, well, that's what caught my eye the most.
That's an interesting one from Portuguese. I'd be curious because I feel like Polish is also very specific and very, I don't know if poetic would be the right word to describe the language as a whole or the way that Sapkowski uses it, obviously because I personally haven't read Sapkowski's original Polish, but I'd be curious if there was like an equally untranslatable word in Polish that makes sense from Polish to Portuguese, but doesn't make sense from Polish to English or Portuguese to English.
Yeah.
Yeah. English is a
maybe.
very simple language, feels like.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's amazing how
Yeah.
simple English is and how much you can do with the language,
Yeah.
at the same time. It's simple, but it's very effective.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. I kind of want to put a pin in this question, and maybe if I hear from somebody who has read the original Polish, I will insert it, I don't know, here.
Yeah.
Somewhere there. Allison, what's been new with you? How has life been since the last time you were on the podcast?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think it's been like a year almost. So, I mean, I'm still in graduate school right now, trying to survive. I think that's the biggest thing whenever it comes to school. I'm almost done with my program, and I mean, I've been taking a little bit longer roundabout way, but I have about a year left. So right now I'm in a doctorate of pharmacy and physician assistant dual program. So I will hopefully in a year I'll be actually practicing. I start my clinical rotations in like T-3 weeks. But pretty much school has been, taking up most of my time. I've been trying to do like reading here and there, puzzling in my free time. But other than that, like nothing too big has been going on. But, just trying to enjoy life to the best of my ability and not stress out too much.
Yeah. That's so exciting, though. Like one more year to the end of your program.
To not be paying student loans, and oh my gosh, I can't wait to actually be done. So
that's exciting, and like a new chapter of your life. And it's so funny that I'm sure you're gonna like listen back to these episodes of Breakfast in Beauclair, and it's gonna be like a mental marker for where you were when you recorded them, which is super fun.
Yeah. It's like, what was my mental state at the time? I mean, do I gradually get happier, or do I gradually get more depressed? I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
The worst and the best at the same time.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Well, I'm so excited to dig into this chapter, and we're continuing our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt with Chapter 2, in which Yennefer takes Ciri to the city of Gorsvillen, where the girl discovers the city with bank clerk Fabio Sachs. After an enlightening evening with R2's rectresses, Tissaia de Vries and Margarita Lozantil, Ciri runs away to Herindum Farm to reunite with Geralt. Here's a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa. In Chapter 2, Yennefer and Ciri ride to the city of Gorsvillen, where Yennefer's status as a sorceress, with a little help of a special magic cream, immediately causes an awestruck stir. They visit the bank of Molnar Giancardi, where Yennefer learns that someone has been attempting to track her letters and private financial transactions. Drawing conclusions from changes in tax code, Giancardi and Yennefer surmise that the dwarves and non-humans are financing the campaign being waged against the Scoia'tael in the north. There's a demand for precious stones because people are preparing to flee due to war. Boats are being built on Foltest sorters and transported to Sodden and Brugge along the Yaruga, where they're being hidden on the east bank. Yennefer takes care of her finances, donations to the Temple of Melitele and to Aretuza, withdrawals for the Conclave, and they discuss Geralt. We learn that Yennefer and Giancardi have secretly been helping Geralt earn his keep over the years. While the two discuss private matters and the state of the world, they send Ciri off into the city with one of Giancardi's clerks, Fabio Sachs. He gives her a tour of Gorsvillen through its history, geography, and architecture, and takes her to the most bustling markets the city has to offer. Notably, Ciri turns the sideshow upside down when she insults the barker and later accidentally provokes and kills a young wyvern. Like Applegat in Chapter 1, Ciri prophesizes Fabio's life and death as well. During her escape from the sideshow, Ciri uses an amulet to summon Yennefer, inadvertently drawing the attention of sorceresses Margarita Lozantil and Tissaia DeVry instead. After clearing the confusion, Yennefer, Margarita, and Tissaia relax in the baths of the Silver Heron with Ciri, where the sorceresses languidly converse about their former and current lovers, the upcoming Mages' Conclave, and the state of the worlds in war. During this conversation, Captain Rayla from King Demoven's special units visits the bathhouse to chat with Tissaia. Inspired by the captain and Margarita, Ciri runs away to Herindom Farm to reunite with Geralt, encountering her memories of the Scoia'tael, the Black Knight, and the Wild Hunt. On the way, Tor Lara, the Tower of the Gulls, calls to her. Meanwhile, Geralt and Dandelion are staying in Herindom with Bernie and the Hoffmeyers. Geralt intercepts Ciri on the causeway, Yennefer materializes, and together they save the girl from the spectral riders of the Wild Hunt. Because of Ciri's bold actions, Geralt and Yennefer finally reunite. The following day, while Geralt and Yennefer have a private conversation on the causeway, Ciri and Dandelion secretly watch from a distance and imagine how the Witcher and Enchantress are apologizing to each other. So now that we've gotten a full, very detailed synopsis from future Alyssa, I'd love to hear your overall thoughts on Chapter 2 of Time of Contempt.
I mean, for this chapter, I thought it was really good. Just to kind of build on more of Ciri and Yen's like relationship as it continues from the previous book. I mean, you definitely see the mother and daughter relationship that does build, and you can see the butting of heads that naturally happens with any mother-daughter relationship. And I mean, it's nice because that's like actually real life, but overall, it was a really great chapter. Got to be introduced to other female characters of the series, which I think is really great.
Yeah, it's such an amazing chapter because it establishes relationships. I love the way Ciri gets to know the city, the Gorsland. With Fabio, she gets a little bit independent and she starts making plans in her head about, oh my God, what I'm gonna do. And she says, where is Hirdan? And you can see that she's already planning stuff to do. And it's something I really, really like.
Yeah, there's like 3 to 4 like big sections in this chapter. I feel like the first 2 are Ciri and Yen and Gorsvalen at the bank and around the town. The second one is Ciri in the baths with Tissaia, Margarita, and Yennefer. And then the last little bit is all about Herindom and Geralt and reunion with Yennefer and Ciri and all of that. And I think within that, some of my chapter highlights and lowlights, it's really neat coming back and seeing Ciri and how she's progressed throughout the story. I think some of my chapter highlights would be things like, oh my God, seeing like Vengerberg Glamorai. This is the this is the thing where we get Glamorai. And that's so exciting. But I find the descriptions of Gorsvalen, of Thanedd, of Loxia are just so beautiful and so descriptive that it's very nice to have a character like Fabio taking us around and guiding us through the city and its history, and it feels very immersive and very real. Obviously, the conversation with Tissaia and Margarita is so fun and indicative of their characters. And when we get past that, the scene with Dandelion and Ciri watching Geralt and Yen at the causeway is just such a beautifully done and iconic scene. So many things that I think be excited about here in this chapter, because there's so much action that happens for Ciri. Yeah, what about you guys?
Yeah, the ending is chef's kiss,
Yeah.
just amazing. At the same time, I really wanted to listen to the conversation to know what they're saying, but it's Sapkowski's way of writing, and we get the gist. We get what they're doing. We know Yennefer is mad and yelling, and we know Geralt is just accepting and apologizing. So at the end of the day, we don't need to know anymore.
I mean, there's like you said, I mean, I haven't read the series for like probably like over a year, so I'm like, okay, I need a refresh. But I forgot how much happens
Yeah.
in this chapter. Like you were saying, they were everywhere. There's a lot of like interaction. There was like a lot of talk with like politics, and I think that's definitely really interesting to see that take on it. Um, but overall, like love the chapter and all that came with it. I mean, pretty much was Andrzej's like writing. There's one thing that really drew me to it was like the comedy and the dialogue, and there's definitely like a lot of this. And again, I really appreciate it. And just like I find myself when I'm reading it, just like chuckling to myself, like in public. And I know people are probably like looking at me, but I'm like, I wish you knew this. I wish you understood what I'm laughing at.
Yeah, I feel like every time I read any book series, particularly The Witcher, but also with like series like Percy Jackson, like there are random lines that will stick with me here and there as I'm like out and about living my life. Like, for example, when I was actively rereading Blood of Elves, I would like go out and exercise and think like, stop breathing like a dying mammoth. And I'd be like doing burpees for like 10 minutes and like crying. And I think the one line that has continually stuck with me from this specific chapter is Yennefer saying, stop stomping around in the mud. And Ciri's like, but I'm trying to clean my horse's fetlocks. And Yennefer goes, it hasn't rained in a month. That is slops and horse piss. And Ciri's like, oh. And being in New York City, I know that there's probably like public perception of like how disgusting New York City is. But if it hasn't rained in a while and there's like just wet gutters and things everywhere, I just hear Yennefer in the back of my head like, don't go sticking yourself in that. That's just piss. I'm like, yeah, she's right.
It's just piss.
It's a disgusting city, but it's my city, goddammit.
And I love it and I own it.
It's just very, very memorable.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been a little bit more relatable like 200 years ago, you know, in the streets.
Oh,
Yeah, that would be like
100%.
spot on description.
Yeah. So before we get to the discussion questions themselves, the one thing that I always feel obligated to talk about with the books, cultural and historical references. We know that Sapkowski continually makes references to real social and political events, or obviously to his own work. I didn't really pick up on any specific cultural historical references here, but toward the end of the chapter, when they're at Herindum Farm, Bernie Hoffmeyer, who is chilling out with Dandelion, waiting for Geralt, he's kind of complaining about his wife, and he just says, all her kin, the Beavervelts from Knotweed Meadow. And if you're familiar, or if you remember, Dainty Beavervelts was the dwarf that was part of the Eternal Flame that got by Dudu, the changeling. So that was a nice little callback to one of the short stories, The Eternal Flame. But yeah, I just like caught it on a quick little reread. Now that we've gotten an overview of the chapter and of our overall thoughts, I'd love to dig into the discussion questions for this chapter. As with the rest of the chapters here in Time of Contempt, we get a small, like, interstitial. In this case, it's from Dandelion's Half Century of Poetry, in which he talks about Ciri, how he knew her, and the center experience of death, striding behind the girl, as he puts it. What do you guys believe Dandelion's preface from Half a Century of Poetry tells us about the perception of Ciri on the continent and her eventual legacy?
Yeah, I mean, like for this one, like dandelion, kind of like dandelion, I guess, like whatever you fancy. I
Sure.
mean, I love either one, regardless. But like with this one, he's kind of like getting at notices that everyone is saying like, oh, Siri has just like a lot going for her, or like things are gonna happen with her, and he's like, she's just a girl to me. I don't know what
Mhm.
everyone else is saying, and I mean, it could be from like a bunch of different reasons. Like, first off, like maybe he's just like oblivious to what's going on with Siri, or like because he doesn't have the context as much, or he's not of the same like magical context with like Yennefer or Geralt, so he might not be able to sense that. Um or like he might just be like downplaying it potentially. So then other people, so it's kind of to keep Siri like hidden from other individuals,
Mhm.
which is like what goes on throughout the series. Um, but that's kind of like my thoughts with these little intros into the chapters, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't thought about that way, Dandelion not being quote unquote magical, and not sensing because of that. Yeah, I haven't thought about it. But yeah, I thought more, in the lines of Sapkowski was trying to say that she was, just a kid. Despite all the things that happened to her, despite everything else, she is a kid. In her heart, she's still a kid, and she wants to, do kid stuff. And we see that with Yennefer's relationship, with her relationship with Geralt. Sometimes she just want to play. She just wants to, take a bath and splash water all over.
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't get to do that very much.
Yeah. I think this is so interesting because one of the things Sapkowski continues to do throughout the series is flashback, flash forward in time. This is something he does on like kind of a micro scale. We see this in like chapter 1, for example. We see this with Applegat, as Ciri kind of like tells his prophecy and then goes back. We see this here in the chapter itself where we hear a little bit about Fabio Sachs. And he continues to use this this device particularly throughout chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Time of Contempt and continually throughout the series, notably in Lady of the Lake. It's interesting because it gives a sense of like foreboding and perspective because obviously Dandelion in Half a Century of Poetry knows everything that comes, and specifically the last few lines of this I find really interesting. Dandelion says, "Nothing that could have been a signal, a presentiment, or harbinger of those subsequent tragic events caused by her very existence, and those she caused by her actions." And I think that this is a lovely preface for the chapter because it really focuses, one, on Ciri, and two, on her learning to assert her independence and like establishing that mental foundation and the confidence to like take her own action. And so it's kind of just like this is kind of planting the little seed in this chapter of her coming of age story and her being her own independent person, the choices that she's going to make. And he's like, "Yep, couldn't have seen that coming down the pipe." And it's just like, oh my God, what is going to happen now that we've gotten this little piece of foreshadowing. So yeah, I think it's it's a really compelling introduction in my personal opinion. And I think even more intimate because we know this character well, and we get to see specifically in this chapter that moment that he's talking about, meeting her in Herundum and on that causeway. So ominous.
Yeah,
Very.
definitely.
Yeah. And on that note, as we said, this is a really important chapter for Ciri, and we're just seeing her again for the first time since Blood of Elves. So I'd love to go into, who do you guys believe is the Ciri that we're re-meeting in Time of Contempt? And how does the assertion of her independence and the choices that she makes affect her and the people around her in this chapter?
I believe she's more ready to get the lines and everything else the other characters are telling her and really sink in, everything. Oh my God, I'm getting confused. And it's more like she is ready to understand that people are more mature and they are ready to give her advice, and she's ready to understand that. She's ready to take the words and let them sink in, let them, be part of who she is going to be later on, because she's not, she understands that she's still a kid and she needs to mature and to learn to do things on her own and all that. So when Margarita tells her to, what are the words?
Seize life by the scruff of her
Yeah,
neck and don't
yes,
regret
exactly.
anything.
Yeah,
Love that.
that's exactly what she does.
Yeah, I agree with that. And at least for like this one, I mean, Ciri, like, as she gets older, she's finding out that she has a lot more going for her than she knows, or like there's so many people around the continent who expect so much out of her, and she kind of just wants to do her own thing and be like a child and make her own decisions. And like in this chapter, there's a lot with like at least her relationship with Yennefer, mother-daughter moment of like Yennefer telling her like what to do, and Ciri being that like child being like, I don't want to listen or I don't want to listen. Like, I want to do what I want to do and be independent. So this is definitely her time where she's like questioning a few things from like people that she looks up to and authority figures. And I think that is natural of like any individual like of us. For example,
Yeah.
growing up, we question our parents and we're like, oh, why are we doing this again? And then our parents are like, we just do this.
Yeah.
but that's happened multiple times for me. But this is like her moment of it and trying to like make her own decisions. And we'll see like throughout the chapter, she does make her own decisions to try and be independent because might be tired of people like telling her what to do.
Mhm. Yeah, she's certainly a lot more critical, and
Yeah.
has more critical thinking, I think, when we had seen her,
Yes. Yeah.
previously in the Temple of Melitele with, Yennefer, and then also in Kaer Morhen with Geralt and the Witchers. Like,
Mhm.
she like, one of the last times we saw her, she was just parroting back, "I'm wearing self-esteem," and, like, it's cute and it's sweet, and we're with her again, and it feels like she's matured. Like, I
Yeah.
believe, it mentions here that it's been about 2 years since the fall of Cintra in one of these chapters, in the early side of Time of Contempt. So it's been a while. She's gotten a little older. She's gotten to know Geralt and Yennefer, and yeah, she's like, I can think for myself now. Like, and we can see that questioning and I guess being on the precipice of teenage rebellion. Like, I feel like we're right about to see it, and we're getting little hints of it here and there. But like, Yennefer knows how to keep her in line.
Oh, yeah. She's like, "No." Yeah, I think she's starting to, like, take notice of, like, personal looks, because especially with Yennefer as being, like, one of the most prettiest, like, beautiful mages, like, known to the time, and she's like, "I wanna be pretty just like Yennefer," and Yennefer's like, "No, you can't be pretty, like, it can only" I think it was, like, with the glamour eye or
Mhm.
whatever, like, Yennefer is putting it on, and then Ciri's like, "What about me?" And she's like, "What about you? Like,
Yeah.
no one's gonna be looking at you, like, only at me," and I'm like, "Oh, poor Siri." I'm like, I would hate for that to someone to say that to me, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those things that, like, I think as a child and for us as readers to be with her in this chapter, it feels very
Mhm.
harsh. But given what we've learned, particularly in chapter 1, of, like, how everything on the continent is out to get Ciri
Yeah.
specifically, it's like Yennefer is very acutely aware of that and is kind of protecting Ciri from the
Yeah.
realities of just the absolute machine that is out to get her. And Ciri just wants to run free and, like, be a normal child or, like, at
Yeah.
least act in normal circumstances, and doesn't really just isn't privy to the grand picture of what else is happening, and how much danger she's actually in.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's kind of like she's not as aware of, like, the politics and everything that's going on. I mean, even, like, looking at myself growing up, I wasn't aware of, like, politics and big worldly events going on because I was, like, in my own world just caring about, random toys and friends and hanging out with friends, and
Yeah.
she's at that moment right now where she's slightly aware of it, but she's still like, sh like Lilith was saying, she kinda just wants to be a kid also.
And she's maturing, she's getting to the age where she's starting to learn a thing here and there. Because we see when she's at the bank, we see that she's starting to pay attention to that a little bit, to understand that the war is happening, that something else is shifting, the powers are shifting, and something else is happening, and she knows that she is the child of elder blood, and she's a center point in the war, and she knows that at the end of the day something is going to come to her. So she kind of has to pay attention to that.
Like, literally,
Yeah.
later in the chapter, some spectrals will be coming after her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think particularly, like, to get back to the crux of this question too, it's like, in my opinion, there's like two major choices that she makes in this section, or in this chapter. Like, it feels like the first is really her choice to go after the wyvern and the guy at the at the fair. Um, which obviously causes all sorts of chaos with the Barker, with Fabio. Fabio gets in tons of trouble. Not about that specifically, but just in the whole chaos of everything. The dog is dead. Like
no.
everything is everything is a
My
mess. The
heart.
wyvern's dead. We see, as Dandelion says, like just a little scale of like the tragic events that have just happened from her having a singular choice. And the other obviously big choice is her assertion to like run away from the baths, order the postern opened, escape to the farms to go see Geralt. It's obvious she's been listening, actively listening to what Margarita has been saying. Like, the note is so funny that she leaves for Yennefer. She basically says, I'm riding because I want to see Geralt. Forgive my disobedience, but I must. I know you'll punish me, but I don't want to regret my indecision and hesitation. If I'm to have regrets, let them be for deeds and actions. I'm an enchantress. I seize life by the scruff of the neck. I'll return when I can. P.S. Tell Madame Rita she won't have to wipe my nose at school.
Oh my gosh, I love that part so much.
It's so sassy.
The best.
It's Ciri, yes, is sassy. But I think you talked about in like a previous episode that like Ciri is such a sponge when it comes
Yes.
to everyone around her. And especially that moment with like Margarita, she was just absorbing everything like she was saying. And you can see that she was actively listening by her letter to Yennefer. Like
Mhm.
it's funny and like I love it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing because, Yennefer says the opposite. She says, don't pay attention to that, to what Margarita said. And then Ciri does pay attention to Margarita. She does get the note and it's like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though Yennefer is like so high on her list, like she's the best and I want to be just like her. The moment Yennefer says, do this, just like, nope, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah. And of course, like that decision to leave has a huge impact, as we see at the end of the chapter in the reunion of Geralt and Yennefer. And, chapter 3, which is the Thanad Ball, which we'll get to in 2 weeks, but has a huge impact on Geralt and Yen's relationship as well. With Ciri and Yennefer, Ciri has just a huge rebellion here about the thought of attending school. And she spends so much time, fixating on the fact that, like, this place is going to be a prison. I don't want to be separated from Geralt and Yennefer. I'm going to do everything that I can to leave. How can I run away? Fabio, tell me your secrets. And, yes, she's rebelling. And she doesn't want to be left alone. She just found a family. At the same time, Yennefer is very clear in this chapter that everything that she does is with Ciri's best intentions. She says, whatever I say will be the best for you always. Do you guys believe that Yennefer has Ciri's best intentions in mind? And has anything changed in their relationship since we last saw them in Blood of Elves?
Oh yeah, I do believe she has her best intentions in mind, because we already see how Yennefer acts around Ciri, how she feels about Ciri. We see that in pretty much every interaction they have, and then later on we see Yennefer downright says, she's my daughter. I don't know, can I say that now?
Yeah. I get the sentiment already.
At this
Yeah.
point, yeah, they've experienced the same stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we know that she always wanted a kid, she always wanted to be a mother, she always wanted to have a child, and this one that destiny gave to her, so she's pretty much mama bear at this point, and she's gonna do everything to protect her and to give her the best future she can have.
Yeah, I agree. Because like she obviously like wants to make sure Ciri learns from the best, and obviously from Yennefer's like experience that was at Aretusa, and that's kind of like the best place that she thought where Ciri can like hone her magic, be around other individuals who might be able to help her as well, and I don't think like Ciri might notice that at this moment because, like you said, Alyssa, she like just found her family. She found Geralt, she found Yen, and she really doesn't want to let that go. And I think that's like really that shows like how their relationship has developed and how much she does care for him and wants to be with him. And we do find out later like how much Ciri cares for him regardless because she's like Yennefer, like I don't want to go, like instead of including her in the discussion, which Ciri it might have been, like, maybe a little bit more beneficial, she sorry, like, brain went a little blank, but, yeah, like, overall, it could have been, like, a better discussion, but overall, like, Yennefer does want her to have the best that she can and the best outcomes, and Aretusa is the place.
Yeah. I think that, as particularly as a first-time reader, it's probably interesting to see the dynamic between Yennefer and Ciri. So I think it can feel probably very gray as a reader to not really be sure if Yennefer is actually being considerate. Her parenting style is so incredibly different from Geralt's. Geralt's is kind of just like winging it and kind of doing like
Exactly.
yeah, he's making a lot of space for Ciri, and we see that a lot in Blood of Elves in particular. Again, when they're at Kaer Morhen, they're kind of letting her run rampant. They're feeding her weird stuff from the mountains, and Triss comes in and is just like, "Guys, what the fuck?" and, and Geralt's just like, "Oh, we don't know any better,
You
huh?"
can see that if she had the choice to have chocolate ice cream for lunch, that's exactly what he was gonna let her do it.
Oh yeah, they'd be hands off. They're like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'd save some bowls for
Go
me."
ahead.
Um, but it's one of those things that like Yennefer has a very specific perspective, and yes, it does clash with Ciri at times, and Ciri has kind of learned when to assert herself and when to argue. And it's funny because we see Geralt doing the same thing with Yennefer in the next chapter too. So both of them have kind of like learned to manage the waters of Yennefer. It does seem that Yennefer has Ciri's best intentions in mind. I think it is just very different. It's a different style of parenting. It's atypical, which I think makes it very easy to skew when we get to other points in the books, or like interpretations by other characters. So I find it's really interesting to see firsthand here, and then for us and for other characters to make their own inferences about the relationship without too many spoilers.
Yeah, you can see that as much as Ciri already knows the way Yennefer speaks, when she can say this and when she can push, and when Yennefer knows the same thing about Ciri, when she wants to, rebel, and Yennefer just cuts it out, and yeah, but I want no.
Mhm.
It's amazing that it goes both ways. It's not just Ciri that knows Yennefer. Yennefer knows Ciri as well.
We have spoken at length about how Blood of Elves and Time of Contempt really launched Ciri's coming-of-age story. What would you guys say is the importance of Margarita's quote to Ciri, and do you agree or disagree in your own personal life? This quote from Margarita, as we've spoken about, is, "An enchantress always takes action. Wrongly or rightly, that is revealed later. But you should act, be brave, seize life by the scruff of the neck. Believe me, little one, you should only regret actions or decisions, even if they occasionally end in sadness or regret."
Yeah, I mean, I personally like really liked this quote
Mhm.
by Margarita because I kind of interpret it as like for me like go with your gut feeling usually and like take like if something comes up do it like instead of like sitting back like and
Mhm.
kind of observing um do something about it. And even though like there may be consequences, at least like looking back, you might not like look at it from like a regretting point of view. But I mean, I should probably like try and include this quote
Yeah.
with more of my life and not be as introvert as I am, because I am definitely an introvert in like so many aspects.
Mhm.
But and like I said earlier, like Siri really connected with this because like I said, she was a sponge and she quotes it and does take life by the scruff of her neck and decides to try and find Geralt. So yeah, I mean, it's a I think this was one of my more favorite quotes from
Yeah.
this chapter.
Alison, if you don't mind, I have a question. Because like I thought you were gonna say the opposite, because you're in the medical field, and the thing they always say to us, like, first do no harm.
Oh,
How do you
I
feel
mean, a
about
little
that?
different context, but yes,
Yeah,
like
but
with medicine, there's oh my gosh, there's so much to consider. Like you have to benefits, risks, like talking to the patient and what they want to do, and like yes, like medicine and like as far as like my future profession, maybe not this entirely. This more applies to my personal life.
Sure.
okay,
but
no, fair.
but with medicine, yeah, I mean, big thing is you want to try to go with the right option and do what's best for the patient. So maybe this quote doesn't apply to my future job career,
Everything.
but with my personal life, it does apply. Thanks for
No,
pointing that
yeah.
out. So
No, yeah, just something that came to mind.
yes, good point.
I don't know. I think it's something very good to consider overall, but obviously sometimes you gotta, take all the risks into consideration, and think about it, everything. I think that sometimes it's okay if you don't want to act and you think you're gonna do more harm than good. Then it's probably the best you don't act. But I think that it's a really good advice overall. I think it's better to regret having taken action than not.
Yeah. This quote just feels like a very fruity medieval way to say, like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Hey, like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
kind of that. But it's so interesting to
The
like,
Polish version of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so like I love this quote. I remember this is one of the earlier quotes I did when I was doing GoodMorhen actively. And I remember illustrating this one, and this quote has always stuck out to me because of that like passion for action. And but seriously, like it's a nice reminder that like this is an interesting way of phrasing it, but it's kind of like your life is yours to lose, or like the minutes of your life are yours to lose, that sort of thing. And like you should be willing to take risks, obviously within reason, to
Yeah.
have like action and things like that. And it's interesting because we're recording these episodes out of order. We recorded 3, we're recording 2, we're going to record 1 next. And so if I had more foresight, I would put this specific quote in conversation with Geralt's neutrality, because I feel like when we talk about the sorceresses and their willingness to action, we see a lot of that in Chapter 3, and Geralt's neutrality is always at odds with that. So it's almost really interesting to see kind of like Ciri, who's been, dunked in a bathtub of Geralt's values and visions, and she's like been baptized in Kaer Morhen and stuff with the idea of neutrality, and here she's finding the opportunity to be like, no, maybe there's another way. Like, I should be taking action. And granted, this is just kind of like maybe recency bias that like she just heard this, so she's gonna go act on it. But yeah, I think it's a really great quote. I think there's probably a lot of applications for it, maybe outside of medicine, but
Yeah.
I really love it. And I think that for Ciri, it serves as a definitely a baseline for the rest of her story, which I find really fascinating. And I think this is such a great summation of that.
Yeah. You can see when she's at the desert, she's like, I'm dying. But an enchantress always takes action. I gotta fight the sun.
Yeah, and like the mages, they also like hold just like so much power or like influence throughout the continent. So, I mean, if they were to stay neutral in like some cases, like similar to Geralt, like might be different outcomes when it comes to historical significance. But like since the mages and enchantresses like do help with influencing like the history of what's going on, it's changed probably the tide of things as it is today. And like something like reading this as well, the quotes like life is short, like do what you can. And like for an enchantress or mage to say this where their life is like completely unlimited, it's like, oh, okay, that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially to the point you brought up, like some actions may change the course of history, and this is something that is
Yeah.
harped on again and again and again throughout the course of the Witcher series. I believe like the start or the middle of chapter 4 of Time of Contempt like digs into that. Even Dandelion's introduction here, where it's like, ah, no, those things she caused with her actions. Like I think that specifically feels very tied to this quote, which I think is again like a great theme to continue emphasizing throughout the series and with this chapter right here. Series lessons, I guess I could say, like in informal lessons though, come from a number of different characters throughout this chapter. And in my opinion, one of the more compelling aspects of the Witcher series is, as a whole is really the range of womanhood and femininity that we see throughout the continent. In this chapter alone, we have Yennefer, Tissaia, Margarita, and Rayla as named characters, and we see a number of other women as well, in the crowd, in the Wyvern tent, and et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to hear from you guys, though. What do you think Ciri learns from each of them? And how do you think this affects her actions over the course of the chapter?
Yeah, I mean, like with this one, I mean, she's one of those individuals where she picks up from like everyone, and she's doing that as we can see, and especially like in the bathhouse, which was a very like moment where you're seeing a lot of different women that come from very different backgrounds or in very different times in their life. So like Yennefer is very much a mother figure, and um but like comparing that to like Tissaia, I feel like Tissaia is like the ultimate mother figure where I think I feel like when she was in the bathhouse, she was very like covered up and everything, while all the other women where they were just like naked, just like having the time of their life. And Tissaia, she's like, I don't know, there's this one part that just stood out because she has major OCD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause like someone would like move something on the table and then Tissaia is like
I
she's like
can't.
crying,
Cracks
like
I
it.
have. I
Yeah.
have to.
she's like just like looking at it, staring at it, and like, oh, I have to move this. But Margarita is like very open and especially like with her sexuality and all that. And you can see that. And I think Ciri also like takes that into account as well when it comes to her life experiences. And she obviously like thinks well of Margarita if she like listens to her, especially from that quote we were like just talking about.
Mhm.
But yeah, she's definitely a sponge and she is looking up to almost like she looks up to a lot of these female figures
Mhm.
in the series just in general. So,
Yeah, I think the way she behaves around Margarita, we already discussed it. She obviously takes her advice into action, and that's what she does. And I think that she sees the way Tissaia behaves and is completely almost crazy, quote unquote. And I don't know if it's the right word, but and I think the way she sees and she says, well, Chisai must have been a horrible teacher
Mhm.
because of that, and I think that dawns to her and she's like, well, maybe Yennefer was a really good teacher because of that, because I could have had Tisaya, and God forbid, because I would have been doomed.
Mhm.
Because I personally can't imagine Ciri and Tisaya as teacher and student, and I'm like, this is not gonna work. Not at all.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating to see how different all of these four women that I'll mention, Yennefer, Tissaia, Margarita, and Rayla. Obviously, the sorceresses come from a very specific social and political class, so they're in kind of the upper echelons of society. They have a ton of power. Like Margarita and Tissaia just rented the entire bathhouse for exorbitant sums of money, and they're like, yeah, we could just hang out in here and like we'll buy off the whole place. And
love
like this is
it.
one of the best inns in Gorsvalan, like hard stop period. and they're just kind of flipping around money because turns out Tisaea's been saving up money since the dawn of time. So
She's been around
it's
a while.
like she's been around a while. Her investments have increased, and she's reaped many, many, many years of savings.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Good for her.
Yeah.
And
What's
so
the name of the inn they're in?
the
It's
Silver Heron, I
yeah,
think.
the Silver. And they say
Oh,
like
love
it's
it.
one of the most expensive inns in the city, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, where are the other guests showering, bathing? They
Yeah.
are not, just a peasant. They're not just a guy over there. No, they are rich people and they can't bathe. I bet, and when rich people can't do what they want with money, they are the worst.
Oh
So
no. Yeah.
I can only imagine the mess this caused.
Yeah, just all the wealthy people of Gorsvalen just very upset that they can't
Yeah,
that the city's been
exactly.
overrun with sorcerers. But yeah, like it's interesting to see even within their cast, like how Yennefer, Margarita, and Tissaia, even especially just between Margarita and Tissaia, as we've said, they're both occupy the same position at Aretusa, both rectoress, but Tissaia has like a very specific perspective on how things should be run, the level of professionalism and decorum that everybody needs, whereas Margarita is much more lax about, I think, the realities of like, I'm wiping their noses and like dealing with rich kids and things like that. And Yennefer sits somewhere, I think in between, where she's a little more restrained in a very specific way, I think, than Margarita. And Margarita's very like flippant about what she's saying to Ciri, but also like love is love, life is life. Like I heard this when you broke up with your witcher. And Yennefer gets very sensitive about that, and Ciri pricks up her ears. But so many different perspectives. And then you throw Rayla into the mix, who they at first think is somebody to seduce, and then she walks in and she's a woman. But the rigor with which she conducts herself in like a military position and the authority is so different from the sorceresses that I think Ciri then watches that and how Rayla asserts herself, and she's like, no, I demand everything be open. I'm acting on the orders of Mistress DeVry. Let me out. And Ciri learns to mimic that, of course, but it's so different. It's so wildly different. And I love that we get to see that in Sapkowski's writing.
Yeah, that's a good point that you like when you say, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense how Yennefer is like the in between of Margarita and Tissaia. And it just like, when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And Rayla is kind of like this, I guess, like I would say, like badass woman who's in a male dominated, like, I guess, profession of the
Yeah.
time. And even like Margarita's like, oh yeah, good for you being in this position. You got balls. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, woman supporting woman. And I'm like, this is great. We love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, except Yennefer isn't exactly supporting. She's pissed at her because she thinks it's all Rayla's fault. What they see at the beginning of the chapter, and she's not happy about it. But she's not about to cause a scene either. She just let her go, but she's just disgusted about it.
I mean,
But
like, that's also great to hear as well, like, the roles that these women can play in the course of the war and the differing opinions they have with the politics and with the effect of war on the continent. Like, Rayla obviously has a very specific role in causing chaos and, like, defending the home front and all of that. But Tissaia and Margarita, at least for now, feel very sequestered in Aretusa. Yennefer hasn't really shown a political side, although she does have a distaste for what Rayla is doing. But they're all allowed to have those opinions and express them freely. And we as readers get the benefit of hearing all of those different perspectives as well, which I really appreciate. I think like none of the female characters, or rather, very few of the female characters across the Witcher series feel flat or fall flat. And I think that this is a nice display of, again, that shade of and the ranges of womanhood that we see. So as we kind of wrap up the chapter, we get this lovely scene, or at first terrifying scene, of Ciri running away to her random farm and being chased by the Wild Hunt, eventually making it, and reuniting Yennefer, Geralt, and meeting Dandelion for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when the Wild Hunt comes to Ciri and it's about to get her, and they say, we may be corpses, but you are death. That's when it dawned to me that it very much is a symbolism for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And you can see the other little things in the text, in the books, because the war is coming, everyone's talking about it. So and also, the famine, because they say when the Wild Hunt comes, all of our crops are dead. The army kills all the crops. So they allude to the apocalypse in that. And Ciri, in a way, is, almost like their leader because she's death. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm not super into religious stuff, but I can see, if I'm not mistaken, they are following Hades, or the king of the dead or something like that. We can see other religious symbolism throughout the books.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the story, it seems like.
Yeah, it becomes the plot of the game, hundreds of hours because of this 4 horsemen.
Also, was this the first time they were had a bigger role in the series, or first time it was more mentioned?
Ciri has mentioned the Wraiths of Morag. I want to say in either Blood of Elves or in other parts, but I think this is the first time that we're seeing them, actually seeing them, if I remember correctly.
Geralt mentions them in the Shard of Ice, that he got a contract at some point to kill the Wild Hunt, but he said that's not possible. And he refused the contract.
Take the money and run.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's not that guy,
Yeah.
He's gonna starve and he's not gonna do that.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of the horsemen or the corpses following death. We see that, as they're running through the causeway and Ciri. And Dandelion even gives I think a loose description of that. What does he say? Lightning flashed once more, and a galloping horse came into view. Behind the horse came something vague, an irregular cloud, a whirl of phantom, woven from the gloom and glow, something that caused panicky fear and revolting, gut-wrenching dread. So, we're kind of seeing that procession of death and destruction. And yeah, that death is a harbinger for all of these other things. Yeah, I mean, there's so many allegories and mythologies around the concept of death as a character, and I think Ciri is just among one among the many, but still I think falls into a lot of paradigms of how we imagine death, being on a black horse and all this other stuff. But yeah, really interesting to see this character and how she and the Wild Hunt have a lot of symbolism around the apocalypse, not just through the books but through the games, as you mentioned, Liv.
Yeah, it's a very universal theme. A book that I was reading, they talked about the Wild Hunt, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the connections are there. And then I'm like, wait, this is a universal theme. It's not like the series are connected. But I was with my boyfriend, I'm like, look, and he's like, oh, I don't care.
Yeah. I've had conversations like that.
It's you don't understand.
This is amazing. You have to nerd out with me.
Yeah. Toward the end of the scene, Dandelion and Ciri watch Yennefer and Geralt arguing by the causeway, and Dandelion says to Ciri, "Poets know more about this sort of thing," meaning love or romance, "than the people involved do. That's the role of poetry, Ciri, to say what others cannot utter." Do you agree with him about the role of poetry and art within our society, and why or why not?
I don't know if I agree, but I don't know. I believe sometimes, poetry can really reach a special space in your heart, in your soul, and that spot gets all warmed up when you read a poetry that you just can't express very well. But I don't know if I would say that that's a poet's role itself.
Poets, writers, musicians, I mean, just in general, like that is kind of their I don't want to say like their job, but like what they're really great at as far as
Mhm,
like I mean, personally I can't do that, put like my how I'm feeling or emotions like into words that are relatable to other individuals and like
mhm,
a poet or a bard, they have that capability because they can see things or they're very at least um Dandelions, like, he says that he's very observant and he can, like, sense what people are feeling without them actually saying anything,
mhm.
and, to me, I mean, I've, like, read things and very much, like, connected to them, and I think it's really great, and I am blown away by individuals who can do that and be able to, like, put things into words. I mean, like, obviously fantasy or series, like, that's amazing, or, like, even, like, a small little poem, like, putting some, like connecting words in ways that can have just a powerful and emotional impact in, like, various ways. It can be, like, happy, it can be sad,
Mhm.
and I think that's, like, so beautiful, and again, like, I give credit to those individuals because I would struggle with that, and they do such a, like, a beautiful job, and Dandelion does, like, a beautiful job with that, as you can see.
Yeah, I think it's also a way of Sapkowski, putting himself in the text.
Mhm.
Like he's more Jaskier than the lion than he is the Geralt of people's life. He can put thoughts and feelings and stuff like that into words in a way that really touch people's hearts. I think it's part of why we all love The Witcher,
Mhm.
because he does a great job at putting these emotions and the way the characters interact with each other in the text. It's all because of his way of writing and
Yeah.
his ability to put all this into words. So I think it's kind of like him saying kudos to himself a little bit.
Yeah. He certainly gets very flowery when he's, kind of performing for Ciri, right? Like, it even says in the text, like, he starts even talking with the tempo of a balladeer and, like, it becomes a poem as he's saying it. And I think it's very fascinating because, like, as you said, like, musicians or playwrights or artists in general, even when we talk about visual art and things like that, a lot of these things distill to the most base elements of the human experience, which I think is really fascinating. So I do think to some extent, like what he says is real, and maybe it's not just the role of poetry, but the role of art to say what can't be said in words or succinctly, and to either embellish it or turn it into song or turn it into music or turn it into art. And I find that incredibly compelling, and like he is a character to kind of introduce that to Ciri is very, very impactful. And Sapkowski spends a lot of his writing kind of making us infer between the lines. Sarah, for chapter 3 this morning, spoke about chapter 7 of Blood of Elves, but we get that scene in chapter 7 of Blood of Elves where we discover that Ciri demolished a shed, but we don't hear or see any of that. We just get it in dialogue and we kind of infer what has happened. And so it's kind of similar here where we're really only getting dialogue between these two characters, but we can still infer the emotion, and then we eventually see it, in the next chapter. Um, and I think to some extent, it the mystery and like the shroud of mystery has a little bit more beauty. Maybe it is Sapkowski just copping out from having to write like apologies between like his two main characters and like the details, but I think there's something incredibly, beautiful in us not knowing quite what was said, and for that to be a private moment, and for us to be with these two characters that know them so well instead. One of the moments that stood out to me in this chapter was Yennefer coming to the causeway and first appearing. And when we get to this part of chapter 2, in the time that we've been at the farm, we're actually with Dandelion for this part of the chapter. And so we're talking to Bernie as Dandelion, and then it's from Dandelion's perspective that we see Ciri running up the causeway and Geralt's running out to meet her. And it's interesting because, like, as he's talking about, the role of poetry, and even the third person prose gets more poetic when he's talking about Yennefer appearing on the causeway. Like the text says, blinding flash materialized into a transparent sphere, and inside it loomed a shape, assuming contours and shapes at frightening speed. Dandelion recognized it at once. He knew those wild black curls and the obsidian star in a velvet ribbon. What he didn't know and had never seen before was the face. It was a face of rage and fury, the face of the goddess of vengeance, destruction, and death. And what an amazing way to introduce Yennefer. And it's just one of those things that it becomes so vivid in what it doesn't say. And because Sapkowski could have literally wrote she appeared in a bubble on the causeway, and it's not as frightening or as compelling. And I find that when we're with Dandelion, it's interesting to see how much more flowery the prose gets, and how this description in his perspective is different than probably any other description we get of Yennefer.
Oh yeah, definitely. We can see, just how mad she gets when someone messes with her daughter. It echoes something of, Harry Potter in my mind. Not my daughter, you bitch.
Yeah, and I feel like that type of writing to me is definitely a lot harder, like you were saying, Alyssa, than just saying she appeared,
Yeah.
or
Boom, she's there.
Yeah, or describing the direct conversation between Geralt and Yen. I think kind of adding that mystery, or us inferring what's going on, I think it just adds a lot more to the story and to their relationship. And also in this part, it kind of supports what poets and bards are good at, the interpreting stuff. Ciri's what are they talking about? And Dandelion's childishly simple things, and they're acting like children pretty much. And even these old hundreds of year old mages, and they can act like children sometimes. But I do like that type of writing, and I thought Andrzej does a very good job with that overall.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There are times where I can't tell if it's genius or laziness. I will be completely upfront with that. I'm just do you not want to write it? Or is it smarter to not have written it? I don't know. I like the effect. I just genuinely can't tell sometimes.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Because you can never be, as precise and as poetic than, when you say stuff like that. When then they're oh no, they're just kids and they are fighting, they are yelling, or he's like that. But if you put into words, you're not gonna be, as poetic and as touching or something like that. So I think it's a little bit of both. Sometimes also when I think it's The Last Wish. Yeah, The Last Wish, the short story. When, I think when Dandelion believes that Geralt died, he says a few lines of how great the Witcher was and something like that. He doesn't actually write the lines, but he says that Dandelion did, that Dandelion said. So you are imagine something out of this world. But if he were to write the lines, it wouldn't be all that amazing, all that poetic.
Yeah. I'd be curious if there are just loose drafts of the conversation between Geralt and Yennefer. And then if he was oh no, this isn't working, I just give up and we'll just do it from a different perspective. Or if that was the plan all along. I have no idea. I have no idea.
There's a part earlier when it was Gincardi and Yennefer discussing politics and all this stuff, and then Gincardi's oh, we don't need to talk about the fate of the world, and Ciri can go off, and I'm I actually want to know what you guys are talking about. Can you include this? Because this is why I read this. I love listening to this. But yeah, that would have been nice to have that conversation. But I guess we'll just stay blank for me.
Yeah. That's what fan fiction's for.
True.
We just need an entire exposition on what Cardi and Yennefer were talking about in that bank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get into fanfic, so I know there's definitely so much out there, and time is limited, but
Yeah.
I know there is a lot of fanfic that probably
I want an entire discourse on trade agreements.
Yeah.
please hashtag trade agreements, please.
Yeah, you can write
I
like
request it.
200,000 words on all these little scenes of the books that were written, and we just got the general idea of the
Yeah.
things. You can write 200,000 words easy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's definitely fan fiction about this specific scene on the causeway between Geralt and Yennefer. I think it's one of those things of like, would I want to read it? Would I not want to read it? Like, is it? I don't know. Is it better that we don't know? Yeah, but what a way to like end this specific chapter, right? With their reunion, and there's so much promise here, you know, in their relationship and in their family, which is, I think, a bit of an exciting thing to end on. And as we kind of close out our conversation, what are your kind of final thoughts on chapter 2 of Time of Contempt?
At least like this chapter, I think we've talked about it like quite a bit. It's like Ciri's coming of age. Like this is, I mean, as it's been talked about, this like series is a lot about Ciri. Like this is like the main character, and I thought it was great that we had like a chapter, like one of the beginning chapters, like dedicated to her and talking to her about her growing up, maturing, trying to critically think about things that are going on and be surrounded by individuals and people she's able to like take bits and pieces from all these individuals has looked up to and does currently look up to be the woman that she will be um throughout the rest of the series. But like overall, it was one of my like favorite chapters. I like you said, I really like the ending, and I think that like stuck with me and I as when I like look back on the series. But yeah, that's some of my thoughts about
Yeah,
it.
it's one of those chapters that when you finish reading, you're like, oh yeah, they got back together, finally.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are there. They are. Doesn't matter what happens now. They are together. You know, that's what matters.
Yeah, Ciri is caused this by her like one decision. She's like, I want us all to be together, and like she's like, I'm gonna run away, and then they're all gonna follow me, and then we'll be one big happy family again.
I
Yeah.
want mom and dad together.
And she's like, I'll just like faint, so then we don't have to like talk or about like what I did.
Yeah.
Again, that's a later problem. I just want us to be together. So
Yeah.
unfortunately I can't solve my problems with just like pretending to faint. But
I
but-
wish.
If only.
I mean, if only I'd have like a lot of concussions likely, but yeah.
Yeah. I think like this chapter is so nice, as you said, like it's a refresher to Ciri, to her relationships and how she really sees herself and Geralt and Yennefer. Um and just I think a nice refresher into the world too, and like the realities of it, right? Like we see her and Yennefer, we're seeing new places like Gor's Villan. I think that all of the description of the town was just a fun and easy thing to enjoy. The markets and the fairs and the wyvern. It brings in like I think just enough action that it feels like The Witcher. It feels like we can enjoy it and experience this with her. Same thing with the conversation in the baths. Like I feel like that conversation is more of what we love, I think, in The Witcher, like these philosophical discussions that we get every once in a while. But it's with these new characters that we've never met. So we're getting new perspectives from Tisea and Margarita, and even Yennefer, who we don't spend like a ton of time with, not quite like this and not in conversations like this. So I think it's a really fun turn on a lot of characters that we're finally seeing. And of course, like Ciri's coming of age, where like she is becoming her own character rather than, a side character to Geralt's story. And I think that's so important to establish here. And I love that we're finally getting that. And so many good, little scenes in this chapter as well, from the wyvern to the baths to the donuts to the conversation with
The donuts.
yeah.
Me and Liv were talking about earlier because like the translation, because I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, donuts. And what were you saying earlier, Liv, with like the translation for
Yeah, it's something we call sonho, which is dream, but it's I think it's basically the same thing, so without the hole in the middle, just a little bun up and a bun, like a sweet sandwich, let's call it. With a cream, with a cream filling on the between them, and pretty much the same thing, I believe. I wonder what's in the Polish version, because I don't think it's a donut.
I mean, I wouldn't be so sure. I actually think it could very well be a donut because I hear from Anita and Carolina all the time that Dolish Ponuts, Polish donuts are just like absolute delicacies. Like I feel like I was somewhere, like sometime in the last few months, and either that or they were specifically talking to me about donuts. And I was like, damn, I really need to go to Poland to get some donuts. I think it was for like their Fat Tuesday celebrations.
Yeah.
We've got Mardi Gras in the US. They've got donuts. And I'm like, I need to go experience this. That sounds amazing.
I am so for that. I would definitely travel to another country just to have donuts, any sweet goods. I mean, we can make that like a Hanza meetup. Like,
listen,
yes.
August, I think about around this time next year, we're going to be in Poland. So
okay. Keep that in mind.
We still got to plan that. I think this is very out of the way from Lent, but I'm pretty sure we can get donuts regardless.
Oh, yeah. I mean, donuts all around. Like, I had a few donuts this morning, so I am very, very down
I need to
for
get
more.
donut after this. That's
Oh yeah. You're much deserving. You've had a long day, so I think a donut would just like top it off perfectly.
Perfect.
Yes, donut. Yes, check.
So that is it for our show today. Allison, Liv, thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. So you can find both Allison and Liv in the Hanza Discord, and next episode, join us as we continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt with Chapter 3. Thanks for joining us at the breakfast table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa with the tidings from Toussaint, news segment by Larson Richterflix. The show is edited by Alyssa with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Bangor, Glamorai, the Original Roach, Connor's Cat, Libby John of Rivia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, James Carson III, Miriam of Temeria, and Softy. Special thanks to Allison and Liv for joining us for this episode, and our international Hanza for their support.